What's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk Podcast. It's a Tuesday, October 8th. Phil Perry's alongside, and the news has broken, confirmed by Phil and I both. Drake Maye will be starting against the Houston Texans in Week 6 for the New England Patriots. Phil, bring you right in. Your reaction to the news, it felt as if it was almost imminent.
It did. When Drake Maye got to a microphone on Monday morning and did not, after being able to watch the film, say Jacoby Brissett is 100% our starting quarterback the way he did a week ago on Monday after the Niners game, that to me was an indication of, okay, there might be a little bit of a sea change here.
Yeah, let's listen to that right now. And it actually is contrasted with, this is right after the Jets game where Drake Maye said we have to support Jacoby. Contrast that with Monday's comments.
I always reserve the right to make a change at any given time. And so, you know, I don't want the fans or anyone to think, like, what is he talking about? Jacoby's 100% our starter. He's 100% our starter, and that's how we're going to look at this going forward. It just wasn't good enough. You know, I thought we played well enough defensively and on special teams to win the football game. And look, as the quarterback, and he understands this, you know, he touches the ball on every single play, and we didn't win the game or score enough points to win the game. And I think he would echo that same sentiment, that it wasn't good enough.
Phil, you and I have been, I wouldn't say at opposite ends of the spectrum on this conversation, but we certainly haven't been overlapping. You feel as if the time is right for Drake Maye to get out there, based not merely on Maye's presumed readiness, but also the fact that there's plays being left on the field. You can be a better team if Maye is out there because of the things that you're being prevented from doing.
That's what I would contend, is that they're probably close to what they envisioned as the window of starting Drake Maye this season. We know for a fact they were planning on playing Drake Maye come hell or high water. It didn't matter how the offensive line or the receivers looked. We knew they really wanted to gather a lot of information on him before going into his second year. And so if the window was upcoming, when you're at the bottom of the league, what's the difference, Tom, between Week 6 and Week 8? For example, other than you might subject him to 2 weeks more of hits.
And who knows what the level of confidence. When does the confidence go? If you get 12 weeks of abuse and disuse and nobody can protect you.
That's a fair argument.
Is that worse than 9 weeks? Is there a point at which, a tipping point, like Mac Jones' tipping point was the Dallas game, and he never recovered. I think that what we've seen from Drake Maye physically and in North Carolina has shown resilience. I think he oozes a self-confidence, oozes a calm too, to an extent, just a day-to-day calm. So I think he will be ready for it in many ways. And I wrote that a number of times prior to the draft. He's got a Bledsovian air about him. So it's 12 weeks you're going to get of Drake Maye, unless, Phil, the Patriots start playing yo-yo. What if Drake Maye comes in and he goes 9 for 28 for 4 yards? And
That's a horrible idea. I mean, if you're concerned about confidence, you can't do that to him, right? You can't be Monday night against the Bears with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi all over again.
That probably is actually really when Mac Jones started to go in the tank.
Well, people have been clamoring for Zappi prior to that, which is what led to the chance for Zappi. Then he gets inserted, then he makes a big play, and the roof blows off the stadium. So it wasn't like he had been playing well leading up to that. But once you make this decision, he has to be the guy moving forward. And you have to just roll with those punches, barring injury, obviously. But you have to roll with what is going to be, inevitably, an ugly offensive product at times. You just hope it gets better in certain areas. This, to me, is the decision coming now is a statement on Jacoby Brissett's play. It's also, of course, a statement on Drake Maye's readiness and his ability to uplift the offense potentially because of his physical skill. But they wouldn't be doing this, Tom, if they were, for example, 3-2, and they were 18th in the league in offense and not 30th or 31st, depending on what category you decide to look at. So this is about what they're getting at the quarterback position, what they've been getting, and what they hope to get moving forward.
Here's the difference. When you do this when you're 1-4 and you're as inept as you are, there is a perception, perhaps, that this will be the silver bullet. You're going to draw more eyeballs to your team right now because you have designated Drake Maye as being the savior. He's going to white knight this thing. He's going to come in. It's going to look entirely different. I know you're not saying that, but the outward perception is going to be greater to, investigate, well, how the kid do in his first week. And I don't think people are going to come up with, if he does have a poor game, well, he's screwed forever. I think the conclusion will be that team is screwed. He couldn't help him either. And I wonder how unanimous this was in making the decision. Like we talked about it on Monday, the triangle of authority. How many times did we hear the word plan? We're sticking to the plan. We have a plan. Jacoby's the best one to execute this plan. Jacoby was our best quarterback from April until August. He did the most things. All of those things hinted at announced, actually didn't even hint at anything, announced that Alex Van Pelt, head coach of offense, was hidebound in terms of, I'm going to have Jacoby Brissett execute this thing and be my lead contractor. And now that's gone. And it's going to be interesting when we talk to Alex Van Pelt on Thursday to read the body language, listen to the tone of voice, aside from the words, and see just how committed he is to the idea that now Drake Maye is the starter.
Is it in any way a dereliction of duty as a coaching staff? Let's just focus on Gerard Mayo and Alex Van Pelt. If they continue to roll Jacoby Brissett out there, given the offensive product that we've seen, and specifically the passing game. They ran for 8 yards a carry the other day. The running game's not an issue. The passing game is right there with the Browns in a lot of categories, Tom, the worst in football.
But we know that those statistics are impacted by game-to-game situations, and it was horrendous the other day. But they're still working with a patchwork offensive line. It's the first game without their veteran center and captain. We understand how important that is. There are so many factors that enter into why they're 31st in the league that go beyond just Alex Van Pelt is unimaginative and Jacoby Brissett can't throw. And we understand that. It's talent, it's roster. So I think just looking at where we stand, if you're the Patriots, where do we stand in the passing? We have to do something. I think that we cannot be ignorant of the context of why they suck so bad. It's not just Jacoby.
It's not. But I would point to a number of different plays where I felt like he's been leaving meat on the bone. And one of them was a downfield throw, rollout throw, downfield to Pop Douglas, and ended up going into the end zone. Where if you look at the overhead view of that throw, Pop Douglas had basically the entire left side of the field to work with. And if the throw had just been placed a little bit more towards the sideline and not necessarily towards the end zone, then he's running away from coverage and maybe doesn't score. But now it's first and goal for a team that doesn't see a whole lot of first and goal situations. The throw along the sideline to Jalen Polk.
Give me that one first. It's interesting because I criticized Polk for flattening the route. And I spoke to a former NFL
Douglas or Polk? I want to make sure we're talking about the same play.
Douglas on the deep one, right?
But he took it vertical because the ball took him vertical.
Right. But I criticized because at the 10-yard line, Douglas started to flatten towards the left pylon. And I criticized him for that because I thought, okay, does he think he can't reach? I talked to a former NFL quarterback who said that was a play that you should have thrown to the open space, which was the pylon. So it's 2-1. You saw it that way. The person I spoke to saw it that way. Pop Douglas saw it that way. But that was a play. There were yards to be made.
I would look at the throw along the sideline to Jalen Polk where the throw really took him out of bounds. It really had no opportunity. You're basically throwing it on the white there. That looked like it was a little bit late. Even the touchdown throw. Jalen Polk should have had both feet down. I want to say that first and foremost. I believe he should have got both feet down. He basically receives the ball in the middle of the end zone.
He let himself get too deep.
He's in the I don't even think he was that deep, Tom. You got to get your feet down. You're a professional receiver. I know he's in his first year. He catches that ball in the middle of the R in Patriots on the font. There's a good 4 yards of space between his feet and the boundary when he actually has it in his hands. You got to figure out a way to get both feet down in that situation. I think the throw might have been a little bit easier for him to reel in if he angles it just a little more towards the direction where Polk is running. Ted Johnson pointed this out on the breakdown, to Jacoby Brissett's left. So if you don't put it right down the middle of the field, right, it's almost a back shoulder throw the way he threw it. Lead him a little bit more to the left because the safety on that side of the field was running towards the sideline away from Polk. Maybe that's a touchdown, and maybe he's still playing. Do you feel like if that had been completed, Jacoby Brissett, they win the game, and Jacoby Brissett is still the starting quarterback? Because I do. I don't necessarily feel, though, that makes this a bad decision because there are plays being left on the field. They lost for a variety of reasons that don't necessarily include that final throw.
Here's the thing. To me, the bigger question isn't how close Jacoby was to keeping the job. It's how close is Drake Maye to being what they defined as ready. Okay, if you're supposed to cook a soup for 5 minutes and you take it out at 4:40, it's going to be hot enough. If you take it out at 2:30, it's too cold, you're not going to enjoy it. So If he was close to 5 minutes, then fine. If they're taking him out well before they need to because they're starving and the other guy's not satisfying their hunger, then that's a mistake. And again, I have a tendency to trust people until I get proven wrong. I've trusted Alex Van Pelt to be a good offensive coordinator. He's starting to disabuse me of my trust. I still need more data, but my confidence is starting to waver. But I think that that's the bigger conversation. And you have done a lot of reporting on what Drake Maye, according to some people in the locker room, think about his performance. Do you think, given the conversations you've had, that he is perceived as ready by people in the locker room?
I do. And that's given conversations that I've had over the course of the last week. But those conversations extend back multiple weeks now. Had a player as recently as after the game the other night. Vidarian Lowe wrote about it in our What We Learned column, which I'm doing after games now this year. We think he's going to be a great player. He's got a great future in this league. But at the time, he was talking about Jacoby Brissett, what toughness he's shown. That guy's our leader. That guy's our captain. So he was throwing his support behind Jacoby Brissett while also acknowledging this guy who's been getting 30% of the first team reps. He looks pretty damn good out there. And that, to me, has been, in the conversations I've had, has been the universal opinion of Drake Maye. And I also would say this, Tom, in terms of his readiness, I think that's been a little bit of a red herring as to why they haven't been playing him right away. He's been ready enough. Nobody is truly ready. He's not fully baked. Mm-hmm. He's not fully cooked if he's a bowl of soup. But he's ready enough that they made him the backup quarter. He had to be ready to be one snap away from playing all 5 weeks. He was ready enough to take on that role. He's ready enough to be on the field right now.
Do you think the Patriots are panicking?
I don't think it's a panic move to look at an offense over the course of 5 weeks and say this is borderline unwatchable. And we have the number 3 overall pick sitting there, and he's practicing well, and he's proven it to us in practice, and that's the best we can do, at least in terms of playing time in September and October. And there are no other obvious solutions for us to fix what's broken right now. And so I think you look at that data that you have through 5 weeks, you look at the locker room that needs help, and they probably are starting to look at Drake Maye quietly and saying, it'd be nice to have him out there. And I don't think it makes this a panic move.
How many in the locker room do you think are looking at it and saying, look at this. Jacoby comes in here. He's busting his ass. He's taking all the slings and arrows. He's trying to deal with this in a respectable way. He's a great leader. I'd go to battle with him any day. And now look what they did to him. I guess
that could be happening.
As I'm articulating that, I would say too that they have to perform. It's something Devin McCourty said on Football Night in America the other day. He said, if you're not getting the results you want, this is something Bill Belichick would always tell his defense. If you're not getting the results that you want, changes will be made. And as much as you respect Jacoby Brissett, you're not getting the results you want. And I'll add one other thing that is from the recent past. When Gerard Mayo lauded Jacoby Brissett after the Niners game and explaining why he was keeping him in, not after the Jets game, it was after the Niners game. He said his toughness, his leadership, he's got the command of everybody there. Never once did he mention production, decision-making, anything like that. So it had gotten to the point after the San Francisco game where the Patriots were attaching the highest values on Jacoby for the things that he was providing them that had nothing to do with running the offense effectively.
To get back to your point about teammates, this is one thing I'm curious about, and we can ask Gerard Maye about it tomorrow when he does his press conference. How do you think they feel about how this news got out there? They're all off today. So there's no team meeting. This doesn't get announced in front of the group. So to your point about the guy who's taken all the slings and arrows, who's been hit about 50 times through 5 games, who's been put in a bad situation as the quarterback and still said all the right things and been a good leader, how do you think they feel about this being, and I understand, listen, we're reporters. We are looking for information. So this is nothing against Ian Rappaport in this instance. But do they look at the decision makers in their building, the players, and say, did you have to do him like that?
Especially in the context of the way that it was dealt with just a month ago, not even 2 months ago, when Gerard Mayo made the announcement that Jacoby will be the starter. He said, I want to tell the team, I want to tell the players, I want to bring everybody in, then I'm going to bring you guys back in, and I'll tell you, which is what he ended up doing. It was a very organized way of doing it. So I wonder, too, if today the team has been told, doubtful since they're all off, I also wonder if the announcement of it was managed. Where did Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter get their information from initially? Did everyone sign off and say, yep, let the media know, we're good to go? Or are there multiple people within the organization who have contacts and ties with national reporters who would just foist that upon the national reporters? It'll be interesting. Like, this is the stuff that goes on when there's a triangle of authority. You got Elliot Wolf on one triangle. You got Gerard Mayo over here. You have Alex Van Pelt running the offense. That's a triangle. Then you have the Ben McAdoo's and T.C. McCartney's and DeMarcus Covington's, all these other little planets outside the triangle who have their say. And, of course, the whole triangle is owned by Robert Kraft. To which I ask you, what scale of 1 to 10, where does it fall that this is a PR-conscious move?
I don't believe that it is. So I'll go the end of that scale. I'll go 1.
2 or 3? But it's got to have some garnish.
Oh, PR. So PR conscious? Everything's
no,
PR
it's
conscious.
Not, this is not driven by it, but somewhere along the line.
Okay. I assumed the way you started your question, you're saying, to what level did Robert Kraft come knock on Gerard Mayo's door and say, it's time? We need some good publicity out there.
I think if they presented this to Robert Michael, I mean, we could use some more cheers on Sunday.
Well, and it's a home game, right? Before they're about to go to London. I think it's only PR if you believe that the team believes it's been so unwatchable and they want something to change, that's why they made this decision. That, to me, is a football decision, though. Like, you want to score points. Mm-hmm. He just said the other day, scoring 16 against Cincinnati and winning is not a sustainable way of doing it. So they're clearly unhappy with the product. So if they care about the product and they're not as focused on Drake Maye, the individual, and his development as they need to be because they're too concerned about the product, I guess you could say it's PR. I would say they need more offense, and this is the easy button, quote unquote.
We're going to get into this way more on Thursday when we do our next Pats Talk podcast. Yeah. But just knee-jerk reaction. You've done a ton of the X's and O's on Drake Maye. How will the offense change with him?
I think you'd probably see a little bit more shotgun. Not that they haven't done it with Jacoby Brissett, but a little bit more, maybe a little bit more spread out, Tom. I think you're going to see a player who is – I think the offense will look different because he will play differently. Throws over the middle of the field, risks into tight windows, things that Jacoby Brissett, this is why they brought him here, right? Because he doesn't turn the ball over, because he makes the smart play and he tries to keep them in games. I think you're going to see more of a gunslinger type of player back there, and that will make the offense look a little different. Again, more throws over the middle of the field, more tight window stuff, more down the field stuff, because I think he's a no risk it, no biscuit kind of guy. And that to me is, they could use a little bit more volatility, even if it leads to more picks. They need some playmaking, given the talent that they have.
They need to seek the biscuit, folks. They need to seek the biscuit. All right, Phil's out. I'm going to bring in my buddy Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk to discuss the Jets' big change on the sidelines with Robert Saleh being dismissed today. Ladies and gentlemen, here's my good friend from Pro Football Talk, Football Night in America, and he's also an author. He's written several books. The guy has nothing but time on his hands. Here they are. It's Father of Mine and Son of Mine by Mike Florio. Mike, stop fiddling with that thing and hold up the books.
I had too much headroom. I wanted this to be, equal.
Show me the books.
Okay. Father of Mine. Boom. Mob story set in Wheeling, West Virginia, the town where I grew up. My dad was a bookie with the mob there, so I heard a few things when I was a kid. Learned a few things as I got older. Page Turner, Kirkus Reviews, the industry Bible on what to read and not read. Basically, Siskel and Ebert, as it relates to what books you should read. Thumbs up for Father of Mine. Son of Mine, sequel, picks up right where it left off. Stands alone. You don't have to read the first one to read the second one, but if you read the second one, it spoils the first one. Another thumbs up from Kirkus Reviews. And on our way home, just in time for the holiday season, we have more. Just in time for the holiday season. This one is the best thing. I'm afraid it's the best thing I'll ever write. I mean, I hope I have something better lurking in me somewhere. This has an upcoming Kirkus review that is also thumbs up. Dare I say, 2 thumbs up. So they're all cheap, too, because I don't care about the money. I don't need the money. I want people to read and learn things and have a good time. And it's great to have my own experience. It's great to have an escape.
Yes.
Football is an escape. from our day-to-day stress and worry and just crap we got to do that we don't really want to do or don't want to think about. A good book is that same kind of escape. So and I enjoy writing, because everything I write at PFT by tomorrow, nobody cares, if they care anyway. This is something that is as relevant today as it is tomorrow.
People, do you want to understand what kind of a Renaissance man Mike Florio is? Not only did he create,
I'm painting too.
Not only did he create from absolutely nothing Pro Football Talk and turn it into an empire, but you went to Carnegie Mellon in addition to West Virginia Law, did you not?
Yes, I did.
What did you major in at Carnegie Mellon?
I majored in metallurgical engineering, materials science, and engineering and public policy, and I hated every minute of it. But it did prepare me. I mean, that would have been a great time for me to have. Where did you finish in your class? A good book to read. I finished with a 3.4, I think, between 3.4 and 3.6, somewhere around there. And I had to make up for a lost first year. Because I don't talk about this very often. And I'd rather not talk about myself, frankly, but you've unlocked something in me. I was always smart when I was growing up, but then you go to a place like Carnegie Mellon and you realize you ain't so smart. And my son and I were talking about this the other night. It's the worst age for a normal red-blooded young American male to be expected to be responsible, studious, disciplined, and diligent. Because, for example, Friday afternoon would roll around. It's like, I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm not studying. All you nerds can go to the library. I ain't doing jack diddly shit. I didn't know. Hopefully we can say that.
We're good.
Okay, good. And my grades reflected it. I got a 3.0 my first year, which was like alarm bells, because I was 4.0 plus all through high school. And so it was a rough few years, and I always felt a step behind when I was in that curriculum, but it did make law school a lot easier. And it just trained my brain to work fast, to be clear, precise, and you throw it all together. And, that's made the job that I now have, which really isn't a job, easier than it otherwise would have been.
So love him or hate him, and there's plenty on both sides. There is nobody that you're going to be able to find who has worked harder, achieved more.
Why would you even say love him or hate him? Why would you even entertain that poison?
Because some people can't stand Mike Florio. I love Mike Florio. I admire Mike Florio.
You're relying on little eggs on Elon Musk's hellscape platform. That's the one thing I've seen. Here's what happened.
No, you should walk around my office here. I'm kidding. Right. I'm kidding.
Thank you. Come to my house. But here's the thing. What we do stirs passion and emotion. Back when we used to have comments on our own hellscape that was the PFT comment section, my wife would say to me, do you see what these people say about you? And I'd say, look, first of all, don't read it. Second of all, the passion that gets them to say those things is the passion that gets them to show up in the first place. And I would rather them have a way that they can express their zeal, their disagreement with me, than show up at my front door and do it. Now they just use Elon Musk's hellscape instead. So I think that it's almost like wrestling, whether you're a face or a heel. Like, I'm both to whoever you might be. And I flip back and forth all the time, depending upon what I'm saying about your favorite team today.
Right. So what's wrong with love him or hate him?
I'd rather be a heel to some fans than somebody that nobody cares about, because they won't pay attention to what you're saying.
Good point. So love him or hate him was entirely fair. People have opinions because you
still don't need to be saying that. You don't need to give credence to that. I must be loved.
I want to respect my audience enough to say, I know some of you can't stand him and can't stand me. Meanwhile, the Patriots couldn't stand it anymore with Jacoby Brissett.
Is that why you got that sweater on? Did you have focus group that told you if you wear that sweater, you'll be more likable?
No.
That could be the only reason to wear something like that.
I like this thing. No, I don't like wearing coats and jackets all the time. Really? I'm a cardigan guy.
Don't you regret inviting me on today?
Well, there's going to be a lot of editing to do because this is also going on television for Quick Slants. So I'm trying to segue
Oops.
neatly into the portion of the program. It's also a podcast, so it's going to go out in the pod. But this is where I segue into the football interview portion, where we can just just slice it off like a piece of prime rib from the bone.
Are you going to count down? Do you have like a
I'm
marker?
going to count down. We're going to leave it in the normal podcast.
Feast aftershave.
And you know
Take
what?
one.
I started getting a little sweaty when you got mad about the love 'em or hate 'em. So I have to.
Good. You should be sweaty.
It's a hot room.
Well, because you're wearing that ugly ass sweater.
It's not an ugly ass sweater. Just because it veers from what you normally wear, you nerd. 3, 2, 1. Mike Florio joins. 3, 2.
What the are we doing?
Mike, the Patriots have seen enough Jacoby Brissett, and they haven't seen enough Drake Maye. In comes the 3rd overall pick. Your reaction?
Thank God, because they were teetering on a mutiny. Mutiny now averted for the New England Patriots. Look, I go back to something I said when they drafted Drake Maye, and we started to hear it's Jacoby Brissett, and that was just real, not coach speak or managing expectations. If your guy that you take with the 3rd overall pick isn't going to be ready week 1, take somebody else. And I don't know what this was other than we got to put him in bubble wrap and we can't get him hurt because we're not going to be any good. Okay, fine. Factor that into your evaluation. If you think this guy is good enough that he's going to be the savior of your franchise, he should be good enough to protect himself, make good decisions, get rid of the football, do whatever he needs to do right out of the gates. The Patriots haven't fallen that far that it's like throwing him to the lions by putting him out on the field. So I think it's overdue. We knew it was going to happen. And once you get to the point where you can confidently say that the season is a lost cause, and losing to the Tua-less and toothless Dolphins on Sunday is enough to come to the conclusion that it's over, I think that now is the time to do it. Give him extended preparation for next year, get him to the point where the game starts to slow down for next year, and he can begin to move toward his ceiling, whatever that may be.
Mike, you understand football history well enough to know here in New England there was an autocratic coach here named Bill Parcells who gave way to a triangle of authority with Pete Carroll, Bobby Greer, and a salary cap guy named Andy Wazenchuk. After a few years of that not working, in came autocratic Bill Belichick, and 25 years of unmitigated success, give or take, followed. Now, in the absence of Belichick, the Patriots have returned again to a triangle of authority. The plan for Drake Maye seemed to be one that Elliott Wolf would espouse, given his ties to the Packers, the Jordan Love or the Aaron Rodgers operation. The Patriots had pie-in-the-sky ideas of the notion that they were going to be able to keep Maye in mothballs. So when they make this decision, Mayo's overseeing a 1-4 team that's taking on water, and Elliott Wolf is thinking he wants the Green Bay Packers way of doing things, and Alex Van Pelt's been calling an offense for his trusted lieutenant, Jacoby Brissett. I look from here and see, this is not a good situation because you could easily get into a power struggle like that.
Well, I guess you could, but once you turn the page from Brissett to Maye, everybody needs to be on board with it. That's what needs to happen in order to have things working on a functional basis. And I think that's where ownership becomes critical to making sure that you don't have a triangle of authority that becomes something else. And I've used a more colorful term in the past to explain it when the Vikings were using a triangle of authority back in the mid-2000s decade. So it comes back to ownership. And I think that's pertinent, especially on the day that we are digesting what is and was another example of the dysfunction that is the New York Jets and owner Woody Johnson, with the abrupt firing of Robert Saleh from a team that was 2-3 and was playing on Monday night and is playing on Monday night for a share of first place in the division.
Do you think Aaron Rodgers, how big a role do you think Aaron Rodgers had in the decision to move on from Saleh right now?
Well, Woody Johnson said that he spoke to Rodgers on Monday night, and basically they didn't talk about Saleh, which, now look, lies get told all the time in this industry. Lies get told all the time in any public-facing industry, because what's in your best interest, what your PR people tell you you should say, and the truth are often two very different things. I think it's ludicrous to think they would have had a conversation that did not, in some respect, touch on the edges of the possibility of a coaching change. Maybe his name doesn't come up, But when you've sold your soul to the delicate genius who is Aaron Rodgers, when you've basically made him in charge of your franchise, and the worst thing they could have done, Tom, when he offered to cut his pay by $35 million, they should have said no to that, because that gives him even more control. And now the bill came due. I suspect that Aaron Rodgers was briefed on this. He was asked for his opinion, and his opinion likely was something along the lines of, you own the team, you have to decide what to do, which is basically the same under those circumstances as saying off with his head.
Sure. I mean, because you could say in that instance, I don't think that's a great idea, Woody. I'd stick it out. And if the 40-plus-year-old quarterback is going to bat for a coach that he just started working for in terms of playing actual games for him, it might give him some pause. But it's interesting. The more I look at the Jets and see Patriots fans kind of laughing up their sleeve at the Jets, the more I look at the Patriots and say, you're not that far away. If it doesn't work out with Drake Maye, you're going to be back in line for your third first-rounder in a decade. You are right now on your fourth play caller. If you move on from Alex Van Pelt, you'll be on your fifth play caller this decade. McDaniels, Patricia, O'Brien, Van Pelt, and if you move on again, you can get into this situation really quickly. And it's funny, when I look around the NFL, Mike, right now, there's a lot of teams teetering that we didn't expect to be, whether it's the Cleveland Browns or the Indianapolis Colts or the Los Angeles Rams. Which of these teams truly stink, and which of these teams just have a little gas problem?
Well, I think that for all of these teams, you have to look at the very top. Dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things, and the owners are far more involved in the process than anyone realizes, because they prefer to be the folks behind the curtain. When things go sideways, don't blame us. We'll fire those people who are doing the things that we are giving them not so subtle messages we want them to do. They're accountable for our proclivities and propensities and likes and dislikes. That's the way it goes in almost every NFL organization, almost every professional sports organization, because if you own the thing, it's your thing. You ultimately run it. So I say that because the Browns are the ones that I assume just kind of accidentally stumbled into contention last year, because they've had dysfunctional ownership ever since the Haslams bought it from Randy Lerner 12 years ago. And until ownership changes, I think the Browns will be the Browns, to paraphrase Juju Smith-Schuster. I think the Panthers will be the Panthers. The Commanders were the Commanders until Dan Snyder was forced out of the league. So I think that's really the indicator. Where are the problem owners? Because as Jed York once said during a particular period of pronounced dysfunction with the 49ers 7 or 8 years ago, you can't fire the owner. And so the owner is the beginning point, and in many respects, the hidden ending point in figuring out that things have gone sideways. And look at the Browns. Deshaun Watson, the horrible contract, the worst trade and sign deal of the salary cap era. For everything they gave up, everything they're paying him, they're stuck with him, and now they're doubling down. And they're not benching him. They don't have to play him. They do have to pay him. They could bench him and go with Jameis Winston or someone else, but they won't, because they're still trying to justify the abysmal deal they did to get him in 2022.
When we look at a player like Jaden Daniels, though, and I think this is what so many owners think, and Robert Kraft articulated it himself, without a coach and a quarterback, you're just another team in the league. Paraphrasing, but he said you have to have the coach and the quarterback. The Commanders added Daniels. They look, quite frankly, like about the best team in the league right now. It is interesting, and the Vikings look pretty freaking good, too. But it is interesting with Sam Darnold at the other end of the spectrum. So the point I guess I'm trying to make is owners are always going to chase that golden child, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Look, I remember when Andy Reid, after he was fired by the Eagles and landed the next year with the Chiefs and immediately turned them into contenders, I remember saying after the 2013 season, Andy Reid is going to get a lot of coaches fired for what he did this year, because every owner will now think, and it's true, you're one hire away from changing everything. You're one player away from changing everything. Now, I don't know whether or not Dan Quinn is going to turn into modern-day Joe Gibbs for the Washington Commanders, but he was pretty damn good with the Falcons. And with Cliff Kingsbury there, who seems to have learned a few things over his time in the NFL about how to properly run an NFL offense, not a college offense, Their biggest concern should be they do so well this year that Kingsbury is gone as of next year, and they're breaking in another offensive coordinator, because when you have a great quarterback and you have a team that's doing well, you're going to keep losing your offensive coordinator if your head coach is a defensive guy. That's why I always kind of would err on the side of taking an offensive coordinator to be my head coach, because I want that Drew Brees, Sean Payton relationship that's going to last for 15 years. My team does well. I don't have to worry about the guy who is primarily in charge of dealing with my quarterback leaving. You got that problem in New England. If Drake Maye becomes the next great thing, all of a sudden Alex Van Pelt becomes a head coaching candidate, because that's just how the owners find the people who are in the pool of potential head coaches.
Going to ask you about a defensive-minded head coach. This is the last question. How Bill Belichick's Q rating is improving around the league, or are people still looking in New England and go, my God, he really left that place a mess?
Well, I think probably some of both. And my concern with Belichick is he's doing too much in the media. He's doing so much in the media that I don't think enough people care. I know I don't care. It's not appointment viewing for me to go see what he's saying on McAfee's show on Monday, see what he's saying on Inside the NFL. They moved it from Friday night to Wednesday night. And folks, here's a little insight into the industry. They don't move the nights of a show if it's doing well where it is. So now it goes from Friday to Monday, AKA no one was watching it on Friday. He's on the Manning cast. He doesn't really bring a dynamic presence to that. He's doing too much. And so there's nothing special about hearing what he has to say. So I think that's a problem, because what he needs to do, Tom, I firmly believe, he needs to have a fan base clamoring for him, ideally multiple fan bases clamoring for him. And last year, when it looked like he was going to be on the outs in New England, I think it was probably after they lost that game to the Colts in Germany.
Right.
We posted a highly unscientific poll on Elon Musk's hellscape known as Twitter. And it was a very basic question. If your favorite team was looking for a head coach after this season, would you want Bill Belichick? And it was like 75% no. Until that changes, I think you don't even get to the point where an owner is deciding, do I give this guy the keys to the franchise? Do I trust that he'll come in and just be the coach and not try to run the show? How am I going to do this with a 73-year-old coach? You got to have a fan base that is clamoring, that is pounding the table for Bill Belichick before this is ever going to work. And I don't know where that fan base is going to be, but I think that's the first step in whether or not he gets a path back to an NFL team.
I agree with you. Maybe being here in New England, I hear the clamor more just because we track what the reaction is to Belichick on the Manning cast, and we observe it more closely than, say, maybe people in Kansas City. And it feels like there is a clamoring, or at least enough being done by Bill to be self-effacing.
He wants back in. Do you think it's working, though? That's the question.
Yeah, I do.
Is it working?
I think it's working enough because it's putting distance between his general demeanor here and the way people perceive him now. And he's able to articulate things that people look at as unbelievable pearls of wisdom when sometimes they're just plain common sense. There are pearls of wisdom in there, too. But I think he has done a good job so far cultivating a bigger market for himself than just one team.
Well, and I also think, Tom, I think that this is a critical point as well. You're going to have columnists, talking heads, radio hosts, beat writers who are on board with this. And I would say you pick an NFL city, like, given the experience that you guys had with Belichick, is there really going to be a group of people who would be dealing with him on the front lines who want him around? I think that's part of it too. So to the extent that it needs a goosing in the fan base by the voices they hear and the faces they see, I don't count on that happening. Do you?
No, but I do think that mostly media members in specific towns prefer to see the team do well because it's better for their business. Not because they're rooting for the team, but because it's better for their business. Then they care about whether or not the head coach happens to piss on them in press conferences. They can take that. And they can take that part as long as the team's fun to watch.
There is no doubt that he is regarded as, and I think this is why the Patriots may have struggled with separating, without question, an incredibly competent game day coach who will get his team ready. Whatever the pieces are, he could take a team made up of 11 of me and 11 of you and try to whip it into something that wouldn't lose by 200 points, although it probably would be close. So that is his selling point. That's his calling card. That's what sets him apart. And you're right. If you can work out all these other issues, and maybe that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to sane wash all these other things. That's become a word all of a sudden lately in other realms. But I think he's trying to make this case that he's normal and he won't cause a bunch of problems. And oh, by the way, yeah, your favorite team will win football games while I'm around.
Yeah, but your franchise quarterback is also going to get shown the door because it has happened time and again. From Kosar to Bledsoe to eventually Brady, they all end up seeing the door. He gets tired of having somebody not named Bill perceived as the most important person in the franchise. Mike Florio, thank you for taking the time. And thanks for the books, recommendations, and the history lesson on Mike's bio. We love him.
Thanks, Tom.